Vibrant Media, be heavily minded and ethically conscious.
This news that has been breaking over the last couple of hours, where our former finance minister, Ken Ofori Attah, has been appearing before an immigration judge, a U.S. immigration judge, in an attempt, as they say, last-ditch attempt to convince the authorities in the United States not to deport him to Ghana, where obviously the U.S. is seeking to send him to, back home, because they believe he's an illegal immigrant there because he has violated the terms of his visa. Now, the case was called today. It was very public. This is something that we saw when Ken Ofori Attah, former finance minister, appeared before the court. I just wanted to watch this, and I'm going to give you a background description. What you see there in your right frame is Ken Ofori Attah taking off his jacket. He is wearing there an overall, and I'm going to get clarity for you what he's wearing. Is it uniform? And thankfully, Janelle will join us, give us clarity on this, because this is all very new to us here back home. But it appears that he's wearing something that looks like a detainee's uniform. He has the marks on his face. This is just before he sat down. He then sits down, and very calmly, in front of him, at some point, he had a bunch of papers that he was in front of him. He had a pen, and every now and then he would reach out and attempt to scribble something. But he sits very calmly, and that there is our former finance minister, Ken Ofori Attah. And it's something that also struck us today. We know him as Ken Ofori Attah, but before the law in the US, he was just known as 720. They didn't mention his name necessarily. They just 720. Is 720 here? They first thought 720 was at Farmville, and Farmville is another of the major detention centers, I believe, in Washington, D.C. And then there is also the Caroline Detention Center. And then the lawyers, two of them, there was a Megashi and there was Chasing, said, no, he isn't at Farmville, and that he is rather at the Caroline Detention Center. So pause for a second, pretty surreal stuff. Ken Ofori Attah, former finance minister, served since 2017 to 2024. He was just a number before a United States immigration judge, 720. Let's get some clarity around what has happened today. What do we know? We know that the issue around whether this can be public came up, and the judge granted the request for this case to be held in camera. So it's going to be private. We're not going to have access like we did today. And let me bring in Janelle. Janelle is an immigration lawyer, and she joined us last week and gave us some very fascinating insight into the way this process will go. And I'm delighted to say that she joins us again live from the USA. Janelle, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. I know you're very, very busy today. So I'm just going to go straight to the point and get some clarity around this. Is it pretty normal for a case such as this to be held in camera? And I asked that because I was on that call. Not that call. I was in the virtual hearing, and I could see that several cases were called before Ken Ofori Attah. And yet, when his case was called, he gets the judge to agree to hear his case in private. Explain to me what's happening there. Is this pretty normal?
Okay. All right. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on your program this evening. And I'm sorry, the sun is setting right now in the US. It's coming right through my window. Okay. So first of all, generally in immigration proceedings, most immigration proceedings are open to the public. Okay, so as you have just stated yourself, all the prior cases that were called before Mr. Ofori Attah's case, they were open to the public. You could see what was going on. However, when his case came up, his lawyers requested for an in-camera hearing. Basically, in-camera hearings are private hearings, where only the respondent, his attorney, and then also the attorneys for the government and the judge are the only ones that are present. It's typical in cases where privacy is considered necessary. Sometimes there are sensitive issues that are being discussed, or there are issues of national security. So in some way, his lawyers have convinced the judge that this is a sensitive issue, and for that reason, it was made into an in-camera hearing. So as you saw when Mr. Ofori Attah first walked into the room, what would be normal is to have a public hearing. But the very first thing that his lawyers did request was to make it private.
Okay, and in matters such as this, the judge granted it, like, so the judge obviously saw some merit in the case. Will the fact that he has an extradition process that's pending, the fact that he's a former finance minister, the fact that he's wanted in Ghana on several criminal charges, will all play into the consideration of the judge in granting this?
I believe so. I believe so, because consider this, okay? Typically, the times when these immigration cases have an in-camera, this private hearing, are sometimes when there are cases involving, say, political asylum. And they say that, okay, this person is about to testify as to, certain information that is sensitive or national security related in relation to the other country, not just the U.S. national security, but the other country. So it's very well that his lawyers could be arguing that he has some information to share that makes this a private matter. Yes.
And so what happens now? So yes, it's closed door now, is in camera, but you understand the system. So now that we've been shut out and the public has been barred, what will be happening? And when can we expect a verdict?
Okay, so first of all, to be clear, I know that, it was stated that today was his deportation hearing, but in fact, that's not actually so. What was happening today was a redetermination of his bond hearing, is what I got. So essentially, his lawyers had previously requested for him to be released on bond. What his lawyers are trying to do is basically to get him out of detention. He's detained. I'm sure he's very uncomfortable in his current situation, and they just want to get him out. They want him to be able to, return home for the rest of this process instead of essentially being, in detention, as you see him there in his uniform, in the jumpsuit. So the lawyers had previously requested it. It was denied. And so today was a redetermination. So his lawyers are requesting once again for the judge to allow him to be released on bond. So that was what today's hearing was. The other thing is the next step would have been, if we could have been, able to hear, but unfortunately, it's in camera, we couldn't see any further. The next step would have been the master calendar hearing. The master calendar hearing is the hearing where basically the charges against him are brought. And I'm talking about immigration charges. The immigration charges against him are brought. We are not getting into criminal issue or the extradition, but just this idea of you are a citizen of Ghana. Basically they state the fact you are a citizen of Ghana, not the United States. You entered the United States with a visitor's visa on XX date. Okay, on such and such a date, your visa was revoked by the United States government, therefore you should have left. So it's basically at that point that his lawyers will state their defense, which is, why is it that he is remaining in the United States beyond when his visa had been revoked? So that is different from the actual, what's called the hearing on the merits. The hearing on the merits, that's when you can call in witnesses, right? Call in witnesses and bring in evidence and all this sort of stuff. Today's hearing was simply to, request bond. They want him to get out. And then secondly, just for the Immigration Trial Council to state that you are here beyond the term on your visa, and for his lawyers to state why he's there.
Indeed, that is a very important clarity. And it's good to talk to an expert, because we listened and we never got the inclination that this was actually a rehearing of a previously applied process that has been rejected, which is that the lawyers, as you're clarifying, I wanted to restate this because none of us got this, that from the audios we sent you that you heard, it's clear to you that the lawyers had applied for Ken Ofori Attah to be released on bond, I think he says, and that must have been rejected. And so today was to rehear that application. Is that what it is?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. So at this point, we are not even to the judge's determination on his ability to remain in the United States. At this point, his judges just want him, his lawyers. His lawyers just want him to get out of detention.
Okay.
You know, they are unhappy about the fact that their client is essentially being held in detention.
And another thing I need to clarify now that you mentioned that, the fact that he had been, this application to get him out of detention whilst the process continues had been rejected the first time, does that play into the, can we assume that it may make it a bit more difficult to get it granted this time, or it doesn't matter?
Well, and unfortunately, with this in-camera hearing, I didn't have the benefit of hearing his lawyer's argument, hearing what the DHS, Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security Council said, or what the judge said. So a lot of this, honestly, is just speculation. But I suspect that the DHS, the government side lawyer, may state that it's a possibility that he's a flight risk. Okay, that if they let him out of detention, they may ask, what will happen? What if he doesn't, come back for future hearings? But, in a way, this is a form of legal chess, so to speak. Then I'm sure his lawyers would come back and, hey, this is the whole point. He's trying to stay here in the United States, right? He's not trying to go back to his home country of Ghana. So why would he be a flight risk? He's trying to remain.
And I'm assuming then, if the first time was rejected, will they require exculpatory evidence to get it reheard? Because first case was made, rejected, you're coming back for a second one. Does that presume that they may have an additional information that we're not, in their initial application that they want a judge to consider?
Yes, certainly. In order to even request this reapplication for the bond, they would need to have some new evidence to show the judge. Obviously, I don't know when the first request for bond was made. I suspect it was probably made as soon as possible after he was taken into custody in the first place. They don't want their clients in, an uncomfortable place such as a U.S. detention center. In fact, right before the hearing went private, what I heard is that his lawyers had mentioned that they want the decision on bond as soon as humanly possible.
Okay.
So they were pushing because they want him to get out of detention as soon as possible.
Okay, and give me what you see there. We see the way he's dressed. Is that the standard way for dressing for people in, or this is his own attire, or this is a prison, or this is a detainee attire? Well, what is it?
Oh, it would be detainee attire. It would be standard issued detainee attire. The detainees, they're not in their regular home clothes. So the jumpsuit that he's currently wearing would be standard detainee.
Okay, and I'm just hearing from the U.S. and the Ghana embassy in the U.S. They actually sent the deputy consular officer to the hearing. He actually was in the courtroom present in person, was also asked to leave. They're just telling us that the case has now been adjourned to the 26th of April, I believe. Correct? 26th of April, I believe. I'm just hearing this in my ear now, that they've confirmed that this is being sent to the 26th of April. Can you please confirm that? Not you, Janelle. 27th April. 27th April at 1 p.m. And that is the next hearing. 27th April at 1 p.m. confirmed by our ambassador, who's just been running us and telling us what the consular officer had returned to say. What do you read into that? What do you read into that, Janelle?
Actually, my question, if you can get, the person speaking in your ear, was bond granted?
Yeah, that's a very important question that we're still trying. There's a lot happening because as people were moved out, I guess the information are beginning to trickle out. We'll get that, but we don't have that information just yet.
Because that would be my number one question, because it's a totally different ball game, meaning it's one thing if they granted the bond and Mr. Ofori Attah between now and 27th of April, he'll be able to be in the comfort, right, of his own home, working with his lawyers to prepare his case in advance of his next hearing, versus if bond was not granted, then this is the next, 3 months plus that he's going to spend in detention until April. So that is a huge difference. So that is in fact the first thing I would want to know is, has he been granted bond? Will he have to spend the next 3 months in detention, or will he be going home to await his next hearing date?
But what is clear from this conversation is that once this is heard, then you now actually go to the actual substance of the immigration offenses against it. We are in this for a long haul. This is not something that's going to be wrapped up in the next few weeks.
That is precisely correct. It is not. It's something that will not be wrapped up until at least until April. But I'm sure for Mr. Ofori Attah, it will be two completely different situations. It's one thing to spend 3 weeks plus in detention. It's another thing if he has to spend the next 3 months.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's what his.
And then finally, Janelle, I know you have to go. I see almost all the other detainees whose cases, in fact, in all of them, whose cases were heard today, they all appeared virtually. Their lawyers were not with them. They were in their offices, et cetera, et cetera. Is that not a practice? Because the courtroom was also shown. We see the courtroom, the judge is seated there. And then there was, of course, the Ghanaian deputy consular officer was also there. But is this not a practice that the clients are somewhere, lawyers are somewhere, judges somewhere, and they can't simply take them into a physical courtroom and hear the case and take them back? What's happening there?
Oh, these days, that is quite common. These days, it is quite common. Because consider, I think we all know that ever since the COVID pandemic, many of us have now become used to remote attendance in meetings as well as remote attendance in court hearings. Because otherwise, consider they would have to each time the detainee had a hearing, load them all up on a bus, bring them into the courtroom, have them wait in the waiting area before each case is called. Also, right now, with the way the United States government has ramped up deportations, there are so many more people being detained. So people are not necessarily detained at a detention center that is near where perhaps they live, where their lawyer is, or where their family is. We have, a number of cases where someone might be sent to a detention center in a completely different state, in a different part of the United States, someplace near the southern border, say in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. Mr. Ofori Attah is actually fortunate in that he's at a detention center in Virginia, which is not, so far from Washington, D.C., but he could have been at a center anywhere in the United States. And in that case, it just wouldn't be feasible, to travel days to come for the one hearing. So this is common to have the detainee to appear remotely via video.
Janelle Oklu, thank you very much for the insights there. And I'm really grateful that we got to talk to you, just to clarify what has happened today before the U.S. Immigration Court. I'm grateful again. Thank you very much. And indeed, that's Janelle Oklu there helping us understand what has happened today. And one clarity she brought, we just sent her the files we have from the live feed we were on today. And she picked up that today's hearing was not a deportation hearing. It was a hearing on bond, which is application that had been made by lawyers of Ken Ofori Attah asking the court to let him go home in the interim while the case is heard. In other words, release him on bond, let him go home, and so we can hear the case. They want him released from detention. The case will still be heard nonetheless, but they don't want him staying in that detention facility whilst the case is being heard. And Janelle clarifies that this was a rehearing of an initial application that had been submitted. That presupposes that the lawyers for Ken Ofori Attah would have filed this application shortly after the 6th of January when he was arrested. And that application to release him from the detention center would have been denied, leading to this application for rehearing, which is why you saw Ken Ofori Attah there in the shot there taking his seat today, because that application to get the court's consent to let him go home in the meantime while the case continues was rejected the first time. Today was the second time it was hearing. It was heard. We don't know what has happened because everybody was barred from continuing to sit in this hearing. So we don't have information for you just yet on whether or not that has been granted or not. But what we've been told by the Ghana embassy in the U.S. is that the case has been adjourned to the 27th of April. And Janelle was just making the point there that again depends on whether or not they were successful in getting the judge to grant this application to release him from detention. If that happens, then he gets to stay in his residence and commute to the detention to the court each day the case is called. And it's possible that, as Janelle has said, and the U.S. immigration authorities may have argued the reason why they first, argued and objected to the application to release him. They may have argued that our former finance minister is a flight risk, and if the judge agrees, they may have to put an ankle monitor on him, possibly in his residence, whilst this process continues. But one thing is clear tonight from the information we just brought you here on PM Express, that it is not a case that is ending anytime soon. At least this deportation hearings will not end anytime soon. We are in for long haul. At least the 27th of April is around the corner. Then she's just laid out for us. They're going to have to go into hearing the substance of the case against him as far as the immigration violation is concerned. His lawyers will have to make a case why they believe he needs to stay there and why he has a justification to stay there. Even if he loses the case, he can appeal. Last week, Janelle told us that. And she said because of the quality of lawyers and the gravitas they bring to bear, she believes that they can drag this all the way to the Supreme Court because he doesn't want to return to Ghana. And remember, this is a very interesting case indeed. Surreal to see a former finance minister who served for nearly 8 years appear like that. That's Janelle confirmed in detention uniform, black, not called by name, but by a number.
Vibrance Media. Please subscribe to my channel for more updates.